Jonathan Pollard, בבקשה. תודה. תודה. ברשות חברים, I've said this before, and I'm always going to repeat it. My wife was more than my wife. She was my mora. I had an idea of why I did what I did, but she filled in all the blanks. At the end, there didn't seem to be much left. And I was holding her, and I was just waiting for the last line to go flat. And suddenly she woke up, crystal clear. I don't know who was talking. I don't know what was talking. But I know her body was finished, but her neshama decided to make a very dramatic entrance. She said, my neshama volunteered to come back for 2 missions. One was to bring you home, and the other one was to bring you home as a Jew. And she said, not as a goy, but a complete Jew. She said the first mission of bringing you home was actually the easiest, which came as a surprise to everybody who heard this statement. But she said the hardest one was bringing you home as a complete Jew. And she looked at me and she said, because it's very easy to take a Jew from Galut to Eretz HaKodesh, but it's very hard to take the Galut out of the Jew. And she said, Baruch Hashem, it took me 30 years, but I've completed my missions. And now I can go home. And she died. Just like that. A lot of people have known Esther because of her advocacy, because of her passion, because of her writing, because of her speeches. But you have to know something about what she did that was beyond all imagination. Yes, she went into the midbar to bring me home. But she also went into the midbar for the American Jewish community and to wake them up and to tell them it was time to go home, because if the government could do what they were doing to me, and by implication smearing the American Jewish community at the same time, then it was time to go home. What she couldn't stand was this belief in Galut, in the North American Galut, that man-made guarantees, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, were somehow an ultimate protection for the people in Galut. She said they've turned these things into avodah zaras. There's only one source of protection for our people, and that's Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's time for everybody to go home now. She more or less presented me as the example of what was going to happen to everybody else. And nobody wanted to hear that, because life was just really too good in Galut. And they said terrible things about her. And they undermined her at every opportunity they had. But I've never known anybody, man or woman, that was so fearless. She just didn't care. No matter what was said, she just plowed on, warning people, go home. She also went into the Midbar here in Eretz Yisrael. Why do I say this? Because there was another Avodah Zarah here that was blinding our people, and that is the alliance with Edom. And yes, Edom. That's what she called the United States. She tried to tell people in high positions that this alliance was in fact an Avodah Zarah. She referred to Ezekiel constantly. The broken reed of Egypt. Don't rely on it. We have only one source of strength in this land. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not Edom. And if you have any doubts about whether she was right or wrong, you see everybody's writing now in relationship to the war between Ukraine and Russia, we're alone. Well, she knew this 30 years ago. But she drew strength from that. She wasn't afraid. She said, this is a good thing, we're alone, because we have one great protector, we have one great ally, we have one great Father in heaven. That's all we need. She would absolutely be apoplectic when people would list our strengths here and start off with our alleged strategic armament and go to the army and go to technology and end up with the alliance with Edom. And she would be absolutely enraged. She said the number one strength we have is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and everything else flows from that. And she would have arguments with some pretty high-ranking military officers about that. And while she never, ever was in combat, and she didn't go to a war college, and she didn't wear a uniform, she always knew what it took for us to win. A Jewish government, a Jewish army, Jewish generals, and the Sefer Yoshua. That's what she would hand out. You want to know how to fight like a Jew? Read Sefer Yoshua. When we got here, she was very sick, more sick than you could imagine. Her treatment, she was supposed to have 4 treatments, and she had 27. I don't know if you can even imagine what that could do to a body. But you would never know it from her. So she sat me down when we got here. And she told me, I need to talk to you about a terrible war that's coming. One that you can't even imagine. And I won't be here to help you. She said, Eretz HaKodesh is surrounded and protected by a wall that has a very small gate in it. She said the wall is halacha, and the gate is what she called the Shar HaRabanot. And inside this wall is the Am, us. And she said the role of that wall and the role of the Shar HaRabanut is to keep the purity of our people. Why? Because she said, unless we are pure, we will not be able to generate the requisite amount of bitachon and emunah and achdut to form a Jewish government, to have a Jewish army, to be led by Jewish generals, to wage God's wars, al kiddush Hashem, to the point where we can convince Hashem that we're worthy of the Geula that will come with a kiss rather than great suffering. And she said the greatest danger we face as a people is not from the Iranians, it's not from Hezbollah, it's not from Hamas, it's not even from our so-called friends. But she said it comes from those who infiltrate past the gate, the Sha'ar HaRabanut, and who seek to divide us. And she would splay her fingers out and said, you can't fight like this when they divide us. Only with Achdut can we win. She took me down to Geula and Mea Sharim almost immediately because she wanted to show me something. She said, look at these people carefully. They don't dress like you, they don't act like you, they don't talk like you, but they are your brothers and sisters. And they are the ones that you owe an immense debt to because they are the ones that kept our faith alive for 2,000 years of Galut, through Khurbans and crusades and concentration camps and who knows what else. So she said, you treat these people with love and respect, and you never forget what you owe them. And then she took me into Tel Aviv, to places that I didn't think she would know about, but she did. And she said, these people, too, are your brothers and sisters. They don't look like you, they don't act like you, they certainly don't talk like you. But they're lost. And you have to bring them back with love and consideration and a full heart. And they will come back. This is what she talked about constantly, Achdut. Until her dying days, that's what she talked about constantly. And the need for us to generate the requisite amount of emunah and bitachon to bring the Geula about. She said it was in our power. Last Yom Yerushalayim, we happened to be down at the Damascus Gate. And it was very bad. This was not a peaceful protest. This was not about civil rights or free speech. This was calling for our blood. And she went up to a police commander and said, do something. Apply the law. Arrest them, disperse them, do something. And he gave her 10 minutes of shtuyot. So she came back to me and she looked at this Chilul Hashem that was going on. And she smiled. And I said, what are you smiling about? And she said, for the first time, I understand why Rav Akiva looked on the ruins of the Beit HaMikdash and saw the foxes there, and he laughed because he knew that the Geula Shlema was coming. And she said, there it is. It's the same thing. That was not something that I saw there, but she had a vision, and she had a clarity of vision where she could see that. During her last days, she kept reminding me of three things over and over and over again. She said, when you meet a Jew, supposed Jew, that you're having problems with, ask him three questions, and you'll get your answer as to who and what you're dealing with. What are the three questions? She said, you ask this person, do you feel the pain of your brother? Really feel it. Do you feel the pain of the land? Because she believed that the land was holy, it was Eretz HaKodesh, and it was alive. And if it felt pain, we felt pain, and vice versa. And the last question you ask is, do you feel the fear of the children as they're running for the bomb shelters? Because she said, those children are our future. So what I'm asking is, do you fear for our future? And if he doesn't answer correctly those three questions, then she said, you have your answer as to what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a divider, and you best back off and just go away. The last trip we took literally took the life out of her, but she was driven by some force that I couldn't comprehend. She absolutely insisted we go up to Ramat HaGolan, to an area that straddled Lebanon and Syria. And I helped her up. And she looked at me and she said, what do you see? So I said, I see Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria. And she said, well, look a little further. Look a little further. What do you see? I said, I see more Hezbollah. A lot more. And she said, no. And she hung on to me. And she was trying to convince me of something. And it finally came out. She said, what you see is Eretz HaTzvi. For as far as you can see. So I just looked at her. I said, you can see that. She said, perfectly well, with perfect clarity. And she said, I'm not going to see it myself, but Im Yatzeh Hashem, you will. So let me end my speech with a prayer that we all may be zocheh to see the vision she saw of Eretz HaTzvi in the wink of an eye. Amen.